welcome.
Thanks a lot for being here. Hope you're comfortable.
Yes, you can only fail from here, right? After that introduction.
No. I'm sure there's so much that we can learn from you. And I actually would love to start a bit from the beginning and understand what your upbringing was like. How did you get up on your feet sort of to become who you are now today?
Yes, you asked me that question beforehand, and it was really interesting to actually think about this, because I've never really thought about it. And I think my really short answer is it was full of love. So I really think that that's very important to kind of grow self-esteem, etc. So it was really full of love, and then a lot of freedom, and really basically a lot of support. If I wanted to do anything, then they were just fine with it, right? So at a certain point in time, I had a job at MTV, and everything was secure, and parents are usually happy about this. And then I said, well, actually, I want to leave and go to a company that has no name and 3 people, and I don't know if I will earn any money by the end of this year. And my father was really excited, and he said, yes, go for it. And that's what describes it well.
Do you think like this, go for it, and it's fine to take risks? Do you think it was part of your childhood? Did they initiate it even before, so you had the courage to do it?
That's an interesting question, and if I'm really honest, and if I look at my parents today, I don't feel they are super courageous, right? I feel they are even cautious, and I have the feeling that I'm somehow the counterpart. So I may have developed also this because I just wanted to be different, because children usually want to be different than their parents are, sometimes.
That's true. So you ended up working in product, but how did this initiate? Where did you understand what it meant to work in product, and what attracted you to it?
So that was pure coincidence. Again, I think, to be very honest, I had a student job at Jamba. Most of you don't remember Jamba. Well, it was this ringtone company, and then everybody says Crazy Frog, and then I say I had never anything to do with ringtones, but Jamba at a certain point in time felt they should build their own social network, which was probably the worst idea on earth. And I really just had a student contract there, and I felt like, wow, I'm learning a lot here, and I feel good about it. And then I asked whether I could join as a junior product manager, while I had no clue what that actually means. And they then said, yeah, why don't you just join and help us building this social network? Because they kind of gathered a small team that was supposed to do that in a very short amount of time. And they accepted me, and then I kind of every evening I Googled what's a wireframe and like all these words they were using. But it was really learning on the job, and I enjoyed it a lot. And then the story went on from there, basically.
So what was the next step for you from there on?
Then it was MTV. So they asked me whether I wanted to join to build a learning platform for children, and I was really puzzled because I was a concept person, right? I was writing concepts and working with developers, yes, but they offered me to kind of build my own team and build my own product from scratch. I was like, why am I the person to do this? But sure, if they think I can do it, then why not? And they accepted me, and I learned, I think, several things about building teams, etc., but also that I'm not the right person for big corporations. And that's when I kind of moved out and got back into the startup system.
What was the thing that you didn't like about big corporation?
Let's talk about the thing that I like about startups.
Or that. Why not?
So yeah, I really like to move fast, and I think, like as I said, I was building a learning platform for children, and if I have to discuss the color of the eyes of an avatar with New York, and it takes weeks to get an answer, that kills my motivation. And that's why I think in startups being... I don't know if that's actually a startup thing, but at my next role, I had the execution power. I could just decide, and I want to do my own mistakes, right? So if I do something, then I want to learn myself, and I think that's what I like a lot about the environment.
You switched quite back and around different industries. So you were from a company that produces jingles to MTV to then Clue, which is working in the health tech environment. How do you pick the direction that you're going to? How do you pick the projects that you're attracted to?
I think that was already clear that everything was kind of a coincidence, but it's always a gut feeling. And I think I do care about two things in the morning when I get up. One is the product that I'm working on actually attractive to people, and is it helping in some sort, which is easier in the healthcare business than it was in games? Do I create environments where people actually like to work and where they like to come to every day to create something together? That's kind of what drives me out of bed every morning, and that, I think, does that answer your question?
Yeah, for sure. No, I think I've noticed, especially with women that I tend to talk, that are not necessarily directed into the right path, they tend to contemplate a lot, okay, do I do this step? Will it bring me to the next step? How do I figure out if I want to land that job in that industry? Do you have to follow a certain path? So
yeah, I think I just met people at the right time that I wanted to work with. And I like to summarize it in a way that I was in entertainment for some time, and it was not that I was a gamer, for example. I played games as a child, computer games, but I wouldn't call myself a gamer. But I really wanted to work with a guy who was kind of building the company, because he was a product person. By the way, who is a product person in this round? And a designer? All right, thank you, just to get an impression. So he was a product person, and I knew I could learn a lot from him, and I wanted to work with him as a human being, and that's why I joined. And from that, we created a company that was then grew quite fast and created some games, and at a certain point in time, I think I realized that I want to do something that has a little bit more intrinsic kind of motivation for myself, and that's when I moved to health. But also that just happened because I met someone, right, and a dentist who was looking into diabetes, and then I switched to health, and ever since I've stayed there, because I think health is the best topic to work in.
So you tried different things out and you landed where you were supposed to be.
Yes.
So you've reached sort of a phase where you're quite good at what you do, you're delegating things nicely, you're working with big teams. How do you make sure that you yourself continue learning?
Wow, that's a very good question. Well, I mean, with a product background and now being the kind of managing director of a company, being responsible also for marketing, for business intelligence, and then also, being in finance meetings all of a sudden and thinking about what is the financial situation of our company, etc. I think it happens on the job again. It's the same thing as I did at Jamba, where I was Googling wireframes. Now I have to Google other things because I have to learn different fields where I have no experience. And for me, it always happens on the job. As I said, I think, I told you beforehand, I'm not a big theory person, I would say. And then sometimes I read books. I have done that last week. I read a wonderful book and I learned a lot.
Do you listen to podcasts or?
Interesting. Yeah, I think I should, right? Everybody in the room does. Who listens to podcasts?
Yeah.
Wow, now I feel old. Anyway, I think to be very honest, I just started to do that last week. While you have done that for 5 years already, I started to do it last week, yes.
Do you yourself have role models?
Yes. Yeah, sure. I mean, the people that I worked with, right? I think I mentioned already the product person that I was very keen to work with. And we have built this company, and I kind of left, but we are still kind of in contact. And I would still say he's still a role model to me. He's a man, I'm sorry. But
that's okay.
That should be okay, right?
No, of course. I think it's very necessary to look into both ways, no? I mean, as much as we women love to put each other in a group and support each other, which is so necessary, I think we cannot move forward if there's no inclusion and if we don't learn from both sides and be ready, both sides, not just women, to take in an example from the other side.
Thank you for saying that.
Thank you. So, taking from role models, you yourself have led big teams. How do you make sure that the women inside of the team feel also empowered and don't shy out and are represented?
That's a good question. There are not that many women in the first place, I guess. But I do have to say that when I was working or when I was in the games company where we were 300 people, so there were quite some women, also in my teams. I wouldn't say I don't empower them in a different way than I do with male colleagues or with male people that are working in my teams. However, I think I started reading And I know it's a no-brainer, so sorry for coming up with it. And I'm not, I'm Sheryl Sandberg's book. And it changed my way of how I was working with women. So for example, just to give you an example, one of my colleagues once said, I'm going to the gynecologue. Gynecologist, yes. And she was like, oh, but don't worry, I'm not pregnant. And I was like, wait a second. And then I gave her this whole speech of how that's wonderful if she's pregnant and she doesn't have to be sorry about it. And this whole kind of, I wasn't aware that women are, or I learned through that book, that sometimes women think further than they should, and that they are limiting themselves because they kind of plan a family, and then while they are planning a family, they are not taking a promotion because they are kind of thinking, I cannot fulfill this role, etc. So I think it made me aware of topics that I should be sensitive about. That's my point that I would want to take. And that made me kind of approach these topics with more caution, I would say, and maybe more sensitivity.
You're a mother yourself to a
Yes.
beautiful daughter. Did you think about these things when you were planning your family, when you were thinking of raising her and so on?
You mean limiting myself?
Yeah, and how you can balance out your speed of building your career that you want to build with being present and being there for your family too.
I think I was afraid of starting a family because I just wasn't sure how it would work out. And of course I was thinking about it, but then again, I think, as I said, I'm not a theory person, so I much rather jump into a situation and then kind of learn on the go how to handle it. And thankful enough, I'm in a very comfortable situation of having my husband somewhere around here who is dealing a lot with the time that needs to be spent on that. So he's helping a lot.
What do you think helps in this regard to, or something that has worked for you to feel like you're balancing out the one and the other? How do you make space for the one and the other? How do you, or what is it that you've learned so far?
I would say it's a constant question mark and struggle. While struggle sounds way too negative, I don't want it to sound negative. It's not negative at all. But I think you, and other people have said this before, you always think you should be more at work, and then you always think you should be more at home and with your children, with your child. I only have one. And to be honest, again, I only take it step by step, I guess. And whenever I have the feeling, and we have a very clear kind of indication system that when we don't spend enough time with each other, we don't understand each other anymore. And whenever I feel this, I just decide that I need to spend more time with my family. And also when I decide that, then I sit on my scooter and I tell myself, this is okay now to go home and not stay at work. I know it, I don't think it's a good learning. It's just a kind of a way of how I cope with kind of the voices in my head.
Do you think being a mom has made you a different leader at work?
That's a question that yeah, I've heard several times, and I have not spotted myself being a different leader. So maybe we should ask the people that I have worked with or my friends if you think I'm a different leader now, but I don't actually think so.
So moving on a bit further, when you're in situations like where you feel a bit doubtful or insecure of yourself, what do you do to boost yourself up? Or how do you deal on sort of working on your confidence? What do you think makes you feel more confident?
I mean, yes, appreciation from the outside, although in my role you don't get that too much. Or I think on that level you don't get that too much. That's a good question. I don't know how to answer that. I certainly have these moments where I feel like I'm just not doing things right. I think I think my coping mechanism is jumping into action and solutions and kind of trying to fix things. If I realize, oh wow, I haven't been too good at this, then I try to make it better. And it's really kind of taking action and going forward.
Yeah, I just want to add on to that, because you mentioned that you were always just doing things, and I could assume most of those situations were cold water. So I guess trying it out, and then you feel more comfortable the second time around.
And I have to admit that sometimes I'm thinking too little. So today, for example, we had an HR offsite session, and we go through the analysis of what's happening in the company at the moment, and et cetera, et cetera. And whenever I hear this, I'm like, okay, we can fix it like this. And I think sometimes it would be better if I just step back and think for 5 more seconds and take it a little bit more high level. But I'm working on that.
Do you make sure that people give you feedback? Do you, you're a co-founder, so I assume it's much more difficult to get feedback from your employees. Do you initiate that somehow?
I would say yes, but we can do a reality check. Yes, people are nodding. Yeah, I think, even in the stand-ups, I know that I keep saying, hey, we need your feedback, otherwise I can't get any better. I need the things that I haven't done well. And I'm very open about this, right? I keep saying when I have done a mistake, etc., I also say it. Because I really want to create this kind of culture where people actually put the stuff on the table. Although I know it's a little bit tricky. It's easy for me to stand up and say, hey, I've done this wrong. It's not so easy for people that are working with me, I guess. And I also understand that it's not so easy to always approach people and say, hey, this has been shit. You should do this better. So yeah, I do kind of encourage people, but sometimes it's not so easy.
Did you have the thought in mind when you were starting out Heartbeat Labs and building the first initial team? Did you have the diversity thought in mind, that you wanted to have different kinds of people in there, and how did you approach that?
So in general, I'm clearly a big fan of diversity. I've seen it not only in gender, but also in kind of nationalities working together. I've seen it in Wooga, the games company, where we had many different nationalities, and then if you end up with a team full of Finns, then, or whichever nationality, sorry, I didn't want to, then it's also not working well, right? So I'm a big fan of diversity, although in my field I would say it's so tricky to find people, find medical people, for example, or practitioners that don't want to work in the hospital anymore, but want to go into a startup. So I wasn't really kind of saying, hey, we need more women at the beginning. I would say it's on the task list, right, that we tackle diversity soon, because clearly, being a tech company, we have many male people.
What do you think is sort of the main reason why women shy out from taking on leadership roles or even starting something on their own? From your experience, seeing women coming to your team, developing in your team.
I don't really know, but as I said before, I think when you start a family, working full time and starting a family at the same time is a little bit crazy. And that's just reality, to be honest. But on the other hand side, if you want to kind of lead a team, it's, maybe I'm also old-fashioned here, but it's maybe not helpful if you are only there 50% of the time. So maybe that's why people shy back, because it's tricky to organize it or something. But I can tell you, you can organize it. Clearly, you have to kind of, and that's what Sheryl Sandberg keeps saying. So it's not new, but you have to find the right partner. But at the same time, I would say it's also a question of organization. I think also Mina is still here, who is taking care of my daughter in the afternoons. And if you organize it well, then it's also possible to work 100% and full time and kind of take on these very heavy roles, I would say.
Yeah, I was talking to Delphine, who was the VP of Markets at Zalando, and she has 4 kids, which is impressive. But she also said the way she did it is just delegation. Delegation at work, delegation at home, and you figure out how to put one and the other in a puzzle, basically. So that works. So as the audience this, I'm going to ask you too, do you think you're ambitious?
Yes, of course.
What does ambition mean to you in your definition, in your terms?
Yes, so I think I said it already, and I looked it up actually. What does ambition mean? It's and maybe I read it out because I want to be clear here. So ambition means a strong desire to do or achieve something. Something, right? And for me, as I said, I think I want to build products that help people. And on the other hand side, I want to build environments where people really like to kind of work and work efficiently together and actually have fun while doing that, because we spend a lot of time together, right? So it better be fun. And that's what drives me, and that's what ambition means to me. Does that make sense?
I think that's beautifully said.
Oh.
Thank you. I have one more question, and then I would love to pass on the mic to you guys so you can get a bit involved. If you could talk, or not, this is a question that I love to ask. If you could talk to your 16-year-old self, if you could just go back in time through a time machine and talk to yourself back then, what advice would you give her?
Not an advice. I would just say everything is going to be all right. Because I think I don't want to be 16 again. I felt like being 16 where you don't know who you are, and I liked being 16, no question. I just don't want to be there again, because I have the feeling through doing and working, I have learned a lot of what I am as a person, what I can do, what I can't do, and where I can kind of create value, and I like to do that. And therefore I would say you are going to be okay. You are getting there. Don't worry too much what to study and etc. You will get there. It's going to be fine.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
Okay, everyone. Does anybody want to ask anything? I can come maybe down and pass on the mic so it's easier for us to hear people in the back.
This was easy. I have a question. I love Clue, by the way. Thank you so much for working on that. My question is for Heartbeat Labs. You guys have that HY studio, a high studio. I was just wondering what drove that decision, because it's not really a tech thing. It's more like a doctor's office for minimal
absolutely.
Invasive surgery.
And also we have another practice chain in occupational medicine. And those two chains, or actually for now it's two practices, but we are now expanding. And I think in healthcare, we will always have processes and human beings being involved, because we can't do it all digital. It's not going to happen. You're not going to give birth in a digital way, etc. You will always have doctors. Well, it would be nice, but probably not possible. I would sign up. But we need people, and we really wanted to learn kind of how we can create integrated care, right? And therefore we said, okay, we want to learn also with actual doctors, with actual customers that are being treated in our practices, where we can have processes that we can digitalize and really kind of in the real world start our products, if that makes sense.
Hi, thanks so much. I work in BI, and like you, don't have a medical background, but think healthcare is the best place to work. I'm just
hire you?
Yes, actually, but we'll talk about that after. I just wanted to ask if you have any advice for people like you, for example, now are founding a medical practice. Do you have any advice for someone without a medical background going into a field like going into medical practice? Do you ever feel like you're missing knowledge, or because I find that is like a definite barrier to entry, let's say, into the industry. So what advice would you have for someone like me?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I totally lack knowledge, no question. And 2 years ago when we started Heartbeat Labs, we said, okay, we need to kind of find easy digital solutions that we start with, because we had to learn about the whole system, about the stakeholders, how is it actually going, what's the regulation like. It's pretty tricky when you go into it. You have probably seen it. So I guess, well, my advice is always to get feedback from people that know, right? So talk to, like yesterday evening I had dinner with a Chefarzt from some clinic in Essen, and he's talking about smart hospital, white hair, super impressive guy. And I think I just need to talk to people that actually come from that field. And then I think that's also what we are doing at Heartbeat Labs at the core. We are bringing together the people that usually don't come together, like medical doctors and engineers don't usually talk to each other. And we are trying to bring them together to create solutions that help people. Does that make sense? Yeah, okay.
Anybody else? Maybe here, and then I'll come to you.
Hi. You said you started listening to a podcast last week. What podcast did you start listening to for your first podcast? And what book did you read?
I don't actually know. I know even if there is an English title, if it's an English book, I don't actually know. It's Die Kunst des klaren Denkens, the art of thinking straight. I would, and it's about 52 mistakes we have in our thinking. And one is, for example, the confirmation bias. I think everybody knows the confirmation bias. That's kind of the logical one. But there are 52. And I was like, afterwards, wow, I'm exhausted. Because now how do I handle 52 biases whenever I take a decision? And it was very charming because the author in the end said, look, in my everyday life, I don't take all of them into consideration. But when I take very important decisions, then I go through the 52 and I ask myself whether I'm kind of hooked with a mistake here. And it kind of inspired me to challenge my thinking. So that was a great book. And the podcast that I started, I didn't actually listen to it then because I decided to just work. And I don't even know how I ended up there, but it's called Om. It's by a woman called Stefanie Luxart. And I just wanted to kind of get used to the format, I guess. I felt like I need to start this because eventually on a panel somebody will ask me whether I'm listening to podcasts. And here I am.
Can I go on? So, was it ever hard for you to delegate? And if so, how did you deal with that?
Yes, of course. I mean, it is hard to delegate. I just did it. I don't know how I dealt with it, to be honest. I need to think about it a little. Maybe I can give you an answer later, but I don't actually know how I tackled it. But now it works quite well.
Maybe we do one more?
Out of necessity, I think, because I just simply don't have the time anymore.
That's good too. Anybody else? Okay, beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Que l'enfant